Stagecoach Speakers, San Francisco Financial District. I have been in Toastmasters for 3 years. I've been obviously a part of the legacy educational system, earning my Competent Communicator and my Advanced Leader Bronze. And also, once Pathways was available, decided actually to drop out entirely of the legacy educational system and switch on over to Pathways, where I am now working through my visionary communication path. I've been a club VP of membership and a club president. And this year, I took on the role of VP of Education for my club, and I've just been so excited to work on Pathways with my club, as well as just sharing some of the information that Kitsy and I have discussed and some tips and tricks we've found with the rest of the district. So thank you, everyone, for making time to join us. I know we don't typically have these on a weekend, but really excited to see the turnout and would love to hear back from you all at the end on how you found both the timing, the day and the time for this webinar, but of course, just any general feedback you have on the topic as well. Real quick before I jump in, just a couple of notes. I am going to be entering and exiting my presentation a couple times throughout this meeting because I'm going to be sharing a couple of live demos with you. So we're going to talk about things like how to get to Basecamp, how to take the self-assessment when picking a path. And rather than just give you a bunch of slides and some words, I'm actually going to jump over to the website at certain points and show you exactly how you can do all of that yourself. And I'll also recommend that if you have any questions throughout, I'm going to have one big Q&A at the end, but do feel free if I'm maybe cutting in or out or if I just need a quick clarification on something I said, go ahead and ask your question in the speech bubble. Kitsy has gone ahead and muted all of your lines, so you're not going to be able to speak during the meeting until she unmutes at the end. But for now, pop your question in the speech bubble in the chat window. Kitsy is monitoring that, and I'll pause as we go through it in case any questions come up. All right, with that, let's jump right on in. So here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Of course, we're going to go into significantly more detail here, but we'll start with an overview of what's new in Pathways. So a lot of us are coming from the legacy educational system. It can be a little bit daunting to think about moving now into this brand new world of Pathways. So let's talk a little bit about that. We'll introduce what we talk about when we say what a path is and the 10 different choices that are going to be available to you. We'll talk about getting started. So how do you pick a path? How do you get all of that set up? And then we'll go into the first level. So each of our paths, as we're going to discuss, are broken up into 5 different levels. All 10 paths are going to share the same first level. So it doesn't matter which path you wind up choosing, all of this information will apply to everyone.
Hey, Natasha.
Yes.
Can you double check that your slides are shared? Some people can't see them. Actually, I can see them. So Jenny, maybe it's on your end. Can anybody else having trouble seeing the slides? Yes, we will be recording the video as well. Okay, Natasha, you're good to go.
Okay, good to keep going. Thank you. Good thing to check, though. All right, so first, let's think a little bit about the idea of switching to Pathways. So obviously, if you are a brand new member, if you've joined since earlier this year, Pathways is simply all that you know. But for most of us, we're very familiar with this legacy educational program where you have 2 separate leadership tracks, a communication track and a leadership track, and we're very set in our ways, I'll say. And so the idea of coming up into a brand new program, especially considering that at the end of 2020, June 30th, 2020, all of us will be mandated to switch over to Pathways, can seem like a very overwhelming change. But I'd encourage you to not think about it as a change. Instead, think about it as an enhancement. Because the way you go to meetings, the way you experience Toastmasters, the way your club operates, isn't going to change now that we're doing Pathways. It's just that certain components are actually a little bit better. And my 2 favorite examples of this are the fact that 1, we're switching over to digital. So previously, you'd join Toastmasters International, you'd pay your dues, and you'd become a card-carrying member. And in the mail, you would get 2 manuals, your first competent communicator manual in the communication track and your competent leader manual in the leadership track. And you would use those manuals and any advanced manuals to get your evaluations and to track your progress. And maybe you went ahead and you stapled all of your feedback forms to those manuals to keep them all in one place. But with Pathways, now everything is first available online. You're going to have the ability to get some paper versions of it, and certainly you can print out whatever you need, but at its core, Pathways is meant to be an online experience. And I think that this is really just going to make it a little bit more streamlined, because you're not going to need to remember your manual necessarily, or what happens when a new member comes and they don't have their manual yet, because now it's very easy to just bring everything up on the computer and walk someone through it. The other major change is that while previously we had two separate tracks, one the communication track and one the leadership track, now both of those are all integrated together throughout your entire Pathways experience. It's a little bit of a shift because previously you'd get your competent leader manual and it would tell you, first we're going to have you be timer, then we'll have you be grammarian, and it would slowly take you step by step through all of those leadership roles. Now it's giving you a little bit more control over what order you take those in. Some of your paths and projects, and we'll talk about this a bit later, will guide you through certain roles, like when to be a speech evaluator or a table topics master, for example. But otherwise, you get to have a little bit more control over that. And working with your Vice President of Education will go a long way to making sure that you're still progressing through those leadership roles. My other favorite thing about Pathways is just how incredibly customizable it is for you. So before, you all use the communication track, for example, everyone's going to go through the same first 10 speeches through your competent communicator manual. And after that, you have a little bit of flexibility to pick out your next 5 groups of speeches based on your advanced communication manual. But now, with Pathways, right from the beginning, everything is 100% customizable for you. You pick the path that works for you. Some of us have the same mandatory projects, but even within each of our paths, we're going to see that there are a lot of elective projects. So you have from start to finish, you have the ability to think about what this needs to be for you to get the most out of your path and out of your leadership and communication journey. So I'm really excited that actually we're shifting to Pathways, and I'm really excited to share a lot of this information with you. I hope you find it really interesting and helpful. So what do we mean when we talk about paths? Well, we'll take a step back first, because before we get to paths, we should be thinking about core competencies. And that's what we see here on the left, 5 core competencies that we should be thinking about and prioritizing for our development. Obviously, public speaking is incredibly important to all of us. It's the first thing any of us thinks about when we think about Toastmasters. But there's also this idea of interpersonal communication. There's strategic leadership. There's management, and then of course there's building on confidence. And we don't all have the same priorities though. Of course we're all here for public speaking, that's going to get woven into everything. But if management isn't a priority for myself, I don't want to get shoehorned into a communication path that's going to force me to think about something that just isn't maybe on the horizon for myself. And so that's where these paths really come into play. You can see here on the right a quick rundown of the 10 paths that are available to you. And the numbers that you find underneath each of those paths are the core competencies that each of those paths focuses on. So you can see every single one of the 10 paths has a public speaking component. But some of them then focus on interpersonal communication. Some of them have a focus on management. All of them, except presentation mastery, focus on 4 out of the 5. Presentation mastery is the only one there that only focuses on 2. It's really more the confidence building and public speaking. It's kind of one of the more interesting ones, I think, because you work a lot more just on presenting, but you don't have to worry about the rest. So if you're looking for an easy way to dip your toe in, maybe that's not a bad one. Now, some of these also are going to look a little bit similar. And again, here's really where the ability to think about your own goals and what you want to get out of the program starts to shine. You can look at innovative planning, for example. That's 3rd down on the left. And you can see that its core competencies are public speaking, management, interpersonal communication, and confidence. But you look at the one right below it, leadership development. It's actually the exact same core competencies, but in a different order. So it prioritizes interpersonal communication over management experience. So it'll take you a little bit of time maybe to think about what are your own personal goals to help you pick the path that's right for you to start. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I know it's a lot to digest here. Do we have any questions?
None posted in the chat yet.
Fantastic. So let's talk about, well, I've got 10 paths open to me and they all look a little bit similar and I have no idea what I'm doing. So how can I actually go about picking a path? Well, conveniently, here's where our first demo is going to come into play. Because Toastmasters International has provided a convenient beginning assessment for you where you can answer a few easy questions to go ahead and help you identify your goals through Toastmasters International, and then it's actually going to make some recommendations for you. So I'm going to show you first where you can go to take that assessment, and then I'll give you a little bit more information about it. So here's where we're going to test out, diving out of the presentation. We're going to jump over to Toastmasters International. Kitsy, can you see the Toastmasters International website? Kitsy, you there?
I can see it.
Okay, excellent. So you have gone to toastmasters.org. This is the main homepage if you haven't seen it for Toastmasters. There is a handy button along the top here called Pathways, and when I click that, I get a little menu that pops up. And how convenient, I have a simple link that just says, take the assessment. And when I click on that, it's going to show you the exact same page I had up on the slide. Here is where you have a choice to make, your first choice. For the most part, we're all going to go through the Basecamp option here. That's the digital, completely online option. You could choose to go the printed manual route because I know some people really do like the feel of having that manual with them, and it has all the same information just in a printed gosh, what's the word? Printed
manual?
Thank you. When you first join Pathways, whether you are a new member or a legacy member switching over to Pathways for the first time, your very first path will be free. You can see mine here costs $20 because I'm already working on my first path. So after your first one, each additional path is $20. And the printed materials in this instance is $45. Now, I'll give you a quick hint right here. Yes, you are welcome to go ahead and purchase the printed materials package if that's your preference. But once you're in Basecamp, you will actually have the ability to print at any point all of the materials that it's going to walk you through. You could print an entire project all in one place if you want for free at your home or go to Kinko's or the library or anything like that. So I really do recommend try out the Basecamp, the online version first because it's going to be free for the first time as opposed to the printed materials which will always have some sort of cost. And then go back and see, do you really even need to print something out? You might find that you don't. So we're here on the Choose Your Path website. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And here in the Basecamp side, you'll see there's a button that says Take Your Assessment. When I click on that, it's going to have me go ahead and select my language. Obviously, I'm going to select English. And then I would hit Start to go through the assessment. And like I said, it's going to ask you a handful of very simple questions on what kind of goals you have. And you don't have to necessarily even have them identified because I'm not sure is an answer option to almost every single question they ask you. Now, two things here. One, maybe you actually already know the path that you want to take. You don't have to go through the self-assessment if you don't want to. You can simply do skip assessment and it will take you to a page where you can go ahead and just pick whichever path you want. Or you can go through and at the end it's going to give you 3 choices. So here I'm going to jump back over to the slide. And what that's going to look like is something like this. So I've gone through in this example, I have answered all the questions to the best of my ability, and Pathways Toastmasters has recommended the following 3 paths for me: effective coaching, motivational strategies, and visionary communication. Obviously, visionary communication is not actually an option for me because that's the path I'm currently working on. So it's not going to let you pick the same path twice in a row. And then of those 3, it says which of them it actually thinks you do a best match for. But even here, even once you've gone through the entire assessment, you still don't have to pick any of these if you don't want to, because Pathways isn't trying to force you to pick a manual. You can look at these three and you can say, yeah, these are okay, but I was really interested in that presentation mastery one. There's going to be an option at the bottom to say, look at all the paths. And same as if you'd skip the assessment, you have full choice of any of the 10 paths available to you at that point. All right, any questions on that? I'll also mention, if at this point you're a little bit torn between two different paths, maybe they're wildly different, so you can't even make the case that maybe you'll probably do the same things for both paths. Maybe they're completely different, presentation mastery and visionary communication, for example. Keep in mind that in this new educational system through Pathways, in order to earn your Distinguished Toastmaster Award, it's going to have you ultimately go through 2 full paths. So you're going to pick one path to start. You're going to go through all 5 levels of that path and all the projects required within those levels. And then it's going to want you to pick another path. So if you got 2 and you're not quite sure which one to choose, just pick one and hold on to the other one for your next round because you'll get to both. So now, assume that you've gone ahead and you've taken the self-assessment, you've read up a little bit on all those 10 paths, and you still are not quite sure which one you might want to choose. Maybe you want to look ahead, maybe you want to see what's actually included in all of those levels and projects. D4TM, that's District 4 Toastmasters, has you covered. On the D4TM website, there is a resource available to you where for every single one of the 10 paths, you can actually click through all of the 5 levels and look at all of the mandatory and elective projects for every single path. And here's another place where I'm going to jump out of the presentation and show you exactly how to find that place. All right, Kitsy, I'm going to ask again, can you see the D4TM website?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Okay, so again, d4tm.org, that's D as in district, 4, because we're in District 4, TM for Toastmasters.org, just like Toastmasters.org. This is going to be the home page it'll take you to. You'll see at the top there's a button called Educational Program, a conveniently named Toastmasters Pathway button, and then you go right on over to Paths and Projects. And when I click on that, assuming my internet connection is not too slow today, it's going to take us to that exact visual I had up on the slide. I have to scroll down a little bit, but here you are. Here are the 10 different paths. You can see it's defaulted to showing us information on dynamic leadership, but I can click around to any of these and the content below will refresh. Say I want to look a little bit about visionary communication. I can read about that here at the top, and then I can scroll down and I can look. Here's level 1. You can see there are 3 projects within level 1. We're going to talk all about those in a little bit. I can jump ahead to level 2. I can see there are 3 required projects within level 2. I get to level 3. Here's 1 required project. It gives you overview and what's included in all of those. And then we start getting introduced to this idea of electives, where it gives you a long list of projects that you could choose from. And in terms of visionary communication, I just need to pick any 2. So again, we get back to that idea of Pathways being incredibly customizable for the experience that you want. So just because 2 people are following the same paths, they are not going to have the same experience necessarily. You're going to make this exactly what you need it to be for your own goals. And so, for example, I might be interested in this idea of using presentation software. And so I can click on this link here, read a little bit about it, and have an idea of what might be included in this project. So I'd have to develop some slides and give a single 5 to 7 minute speech. That sounds perfect. Right? So a very, very powerful tool. And if you're anything like me and you love strategizing and figuring out exactly how much time it's going to take me to get through all 5 levels, because I know now how many projects and how many additional resources I'm going to need to work on, this is a fantastic resource to go through. And hopefully gives you a little bit more insight on what's actually included in the various 10 paths before you go ahead and pick one. All right, jumping back to the presentation. So now we're going to go ahead and assume that you have figured all of it out. You've identified your first path, and now you're ready to get into Basecamp. So you're going to wind up going to Toastmasters.org. You're going to go to that same Pathways place, and I'll show you how to get into Basecamp. But before we do that, I'm going to reassure you to tell you that just because you're new, just because you're getting started in Pathways, just because there's no longer a physical manual, doesn't mean that Toastmasters is going to kick you out into the field and say good luck and leave you at that. You have a full suite of tutorials and resources built into Basecamp, and they are there to answer any and all questions you might have. You'll see that this is going to be where you can find all sorts of project resources if you couldn't find them before, all sorts of tutorials. I highly, highly recommend taking a look at it. And again, I'm going to jump out one more time to go into another demo here to show you exactly how to find this. We'll show you how to log into Basecamp and where to find this, and then we'll jump right on into level 1. All right, so I am over here. I'm going to exit out of the assessment. So I, again, go to the Pathways ribbon, or the ribbon at the top of the Toastmasters International website, and I go to Pathways. And now I'm going to say go to Basecamp. You can also go to access my path through Basecamp. So if I do that actually a little bit closer, Pathways, access my path through Basecamp. If you haven't already done so, it's going to have you log in to Toastmasters International. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and log in as a member. If you happen to be the Vice President of Education, you'll also wind up seeing this button here, log in as Basecamp Manager. Don't worry about that for now. We will definitely be having more webinars on tips and tricks specifically for VPEs as well. For now, it's just log in as a member. And here we are in Basecamp. This is the home page for Basecamp. The first thing it wants me to do is go through this little tutorial, so it's already going to try and give you a mini tour. Feel free to go ahead and click through next and get a sense of what's here. If you've done it a couple times or if you don't want to do it right now, you can click the little X and get out of that for now. So first things first, that tutorials and resources I mentioned, it's right there on the home page. You'll mouse over here, tutorials and resources, go down here and you'll click on that link. It'll take you to everything you need. Once you've picked your path and you've gone through the process of purchasing it, whether that's for free for your first one or the $20 for any after that, you're going to want to give it a little bit of time. You're not going to immediately be able to jump right on into Basecamp, but once you give it, say, a couple hours, it should be up and running. You'll be able to scroll down. You can see there's a ton of information here that I recommend you go through, but where you're going to really care about is My Education Transcript down here at the bottom. Visionary Communication is my path, and we're going to go ahead and open Curriculum. And here's where we get to My Path. You can see here on the left, we've got all 5 levels. In theory, you're only going to have access to level 1 because that is the level you are on. You're not going to be able to look, you'll see here on the right, we've got all these launch icons. You'll see some activate icons for ones that you haven't been in before. You are not going to be able to click on any launch or activate icons for any future level until you've unlocked the previous levels. Obviously, I have full access to everything because I'm working through level 5 right now, which is at the very bottom. But while you're on level 1, you're going to say click through to level 2. You're just going to see these headers. You're not going to see the ability to open them. So that's, again, another way where that D4TM website, which has all the paths and projects listed, is going to be another really invaluable resource for you if you want to look ahead and have a little more information on what's involved in those. But for today, we're just focused on level 1. As I mentioned before, level 1 is the same for all of your 10 paths. So it doesn't matter which path you've chosen. It doesn't matter if you've moved on to your second path or not. You are always going to do these same first 3 projects. And those projects are your icebreaker project, they're your evaluation and feedback project, and they're your researching and presenting project. If you've been in Pathways for any amount of time, you all know what an icebreaker is, but for those of you who don't, you can think about it as just your very first speech, and your only point is to get up in front of your club and to start talking. There's nothing special you have to do. There are no specific skills that it's asking you to focus on at this point. It's really just working with your Vice President of Education to pick a day and time where you're going to stand up and give your first speech and talk a little bit about yourself. Now, in terms of a topic for your icebreaker, it's still completely up to you what you want to talk about. If you've never been in Toastmasters before, I'll recommend that you keep your icebreaker pretty simple and a little bit personal. Think about something really easy that you know a ton about, right? It could be your favorite memory as a kid. It could be your favorite thing to cook. It could be just talking about your family or your work, something that you know like the back of your hand, so that once you stand up in front of people and you start to talk, you're not trying to remember everything about your speech. You're just having to focus on standing and actually talking. And maybe you have notes, maybe you don't. That's all perfectly fine. It's just the first speech. For those of you who've given an icebreaker before, either because you've completed a legacy educational system or because you've completed your first pass and you're moving on to your second one, I'll challenge you to think about your icebreaker maybe a little bit differently if you don't want to just give another introductory speech again. Instead, why not think about your icebreaker as a way to tell your club a little bit about yourself, but in the perspective of the path that you have chosen. So for example, my own path is visionary communication, and my icebreaker was all about why I chose that path and what my own goal was for myself as I was going to move through these 5 levels. Now, obviously, those goals are going to adjust as I go through and I learn more throughout the levels and projects. But I had in my mind this vision of coming up with newsletters, of coming up with presentation resources for my work team members, of all sorts of things that I wanted to develop and how I would communicate all of that visually. So this worked out perfectly for me to use my icebreaker as a way to get those thoughts on paper and talk about them to my club. As usual, your icebreaker speech is also just 4 to 6 minutes, so no change there. Once you've completed your icebreaker, you'd move into your evaluation and feedback project. Here we get into a little bit more of a complicated project. I won't say complicated, I'll say detailed. There's actually now 2 parts to this, because on the one hand, there's still going to be that speech component. You're going to give a speech, topic of your choice still, the sky's the limit. You're going to receive some feedback from your speech evaluator in your meeting, and then you're going to think about that feedback you got, and you're going to give another speech, and you're going to incorporate that feedback. Now, if you want, you can choose to give the exact same speech again. It makes a very effective before and after comparison. And if you have the ability to, it's fantastic to be able to get the same speech evaluator again, who can really see how you've grown and incorporated that feedback. But that's all not actually required. You could choose to pick any other person in your club to be your speech evaluator, which is good because we don't always have the convenience of having the same people in the same meetings every time at the same time as us. And you can also pick any topic you want. You could have a completely different speech, because probably at this point, so early in your Pathways journey, the type of feedback you're going to get is going to be pretty broad and probably going to align to just about anything you're going to talk about. Things like slow down your pace, or be a little bit louder, or try making eye contact instead of staring at your shoes. Simple feedback that you can incorporate into any speech. So that's part 1. Give a speech, get some feedback, give a second speech. Part 2 of this project is now to be a speech evaluator yourself. And that's as simple as working with your club vice president of education to find a time where you can be a speech evaluator. And so you'll go through and you'll take that speaker's speech evaluation form, you'll fill it out during the meeting as you're listening to them speaking, and then you'll stand up during the meeting and you'll give your evaluation of their speech. Meanwhile, someone else in your club will also be evaluating you as a speech evaluator. The third project in level 1 is your researching and presenting. This goes a little bit easier. We're back to just a single speech. It's going to be 5 to 7 minutes long. But here's where we actually get a little bit more interesting. This is where it's going to give you a guide to fill out as you go through this project to think about how to go about researching a topic. And you'll give you an outline where you can put in what your topic is, what some, starting facts are, etc. And so here's where, again, it's going to be any topic of your choice. It's going to walk you through how to think through researching a topic and then presenting that research correctly and citing your sources. And then you're going to work with your VP of Education, schedule your 5 to 7 minute speech, and there you have it. Now, I mentioned that all of these 3 projects are the same for all 10 paths. They're obviously all slightly different projects independent of each other, but you're still going to find that every single project within level 1, level 2, level 3, irregardless of path, are going to share some common components. And so let's also talk about those for a moment. Again, I'm going to jump back over to my presentation. Give me a moment to advance. So the first thing, you're going to go in, you're going to click that activate button next to your next project, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to click the launch button. It's going to give you a pop-up window. It's going to tell you a little bit about the particular project that you're working on, which we just had a quick overview of, and then it's going to bring you to a pre-assessment. Again, really simple. You can see that this is going to be 6 questions long. I'm going to rate myself on a scale of 1 to 5 based on those questions, and they're going to be relevant to the project at hand. You can see here, this was for my icebreaker, and it asked me, I am confident and calm when speaking in front of groups. And how did I rate myself? Yeah, about a 4. I've been doing this for a few years now, but still not perfect. So all of your projects are going to have this pre-assessment. It is a mandatory component. It's not difficult. It's 6 or so questions. This is not rocket science, so please make sure you take your pre-assessment. You're also going to be given, throughout each of these projects, a project checklist. This here is the project checklist for the icebreaker. You can see it gives you a little more information at the top that you've already found out about the project, its purpose, the overview, any requirements for the project. In this case, it's a single 4 to 6 minute speech. In the case of the evaluation and feedback project, it's going to tell you 2 5 to 7 minute speeches and a speech evaluation role. And then it's going to tell you your exact steps that you need to take to make sure you've completed the project. In this case, scheduling your speech with your VPE, writing your speech, rehearsing it, and then going to the post-project assessment, which we'll talk about in a moment. As you go through each of these projects in this pop-up window you'll have in front of you, there's going to be a ton of resources it's going to give you specific to the project you're looking at. In this case, on your icebreaker, it's going to talk to you about just generally thinking about a speech. How do you compose a speech, your intro, your body, your conclusion? But the resources it gives you and the pages it's going to have you tab through will be specific to the project you're working on. But at the end of all of those, in addition to the 2 slides we just looked at, you're also going to get an evaluation or a resources page for all of your projects. And it's going to tell you, under that resources column on the right, here are all of the documents that you might find useful. Your first is always going to be your evaluation resource. This is what you're going to go ahead and print out, and that's what you're going to hand to your evaluator in the meeting. It could be your speech evaluator. It could just be anyone in the club who's evaluating you if you're taking on a leadership role, for example, like a speech evaluator or a table topics master. You're going to have the ability to print your project. So remember how we talked about you could go ahead and purchase all of your projects in paper format, or you could get it for free through the Basecamp version that we're showing. You can always get access to the full project in PDF format, and then you can just print it yourself. And then lastly, in this case, we saw that there was an outline worksheet, and so you can go ahead and click that as well. Different projects are going to have different resources. You'll always have the evaluation resource, and you'll always have the print my project resource, and everything after that is just dependent on the project. And then once you've done all of that, you're going to go back after you've given your speech or after you've had your role, and you're going to take a post-assessment. So you can see here now, it's going to be those same questions. In this case, it was actually just 4 questions, and it's going to show you, here's how you rated yourself before on these questions, and here's how you rated yourself after. And it's a really nice way to feel and to be able to see that you have improved in some ways, in theory. Not always, but in theory. I'll also mention that you must complete the post-assessment. It assumes that you've completed the pre-assessment, which is also mandatory, but you must complete the post-assessment in order to have completed the level. So let's talk about completing projects, completing levels. So we're going to assume at this point we're in level 1. I've given my icebreaker, I've done my evaluation and feedback project, and I've done my researching and presenting project, and now I'm ready to be done. Not quite. Before you can move on to level 2, a couple of things need to happen. I'm going to jump back out here just so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm back in Basecamp. I will have finished all 3 of these projects. You'll notice I conveniently have check marks next to them. You'll go ahead, this button here is going to say activate. You're going to click activate, and then you're going to click view certificate, and that's going to tell you your final action steps needed. What it boils down to is this. Once you've activated your completion, you need to contact your VP of Education. This is incredibly important because your VP of Education holds all the power to letting you move forward to the future levels. They are going to do two things for you. The first is they're going to go into their own Basecamp manager profile, and they are going to approve that you have completed level 1. Now, it may be that you have some materials you're going to need to share with them, like a researching checklist, for example, or a research worksheet that you filled out to prove that you went through the process that that project required of you. And then they're going to say, yes, that Kitsi Aviles went through and has completed all of her necessary requirements for level 1. I approve it. And that is what's first going to get you now access to level 2. And then again, once you go into Basecamp, you'll now show level 2. We'll see what projects are there. You'll start from the beginning and move on just as you did with level 1. The other thing your Vice President of Education is going to need to do for you is to go into Club Central and actually process the fact that you have completed level 1. And what that does for you is it actually gets you the award. So now you can say, in my instance, that I am a VC1, meaning I have completed Visionary Communication 1. I'm actually a VC4 because, as you can see, I've completed my Visionary Communication levels 1 through 4. But that's how that'll work for level 1. And then, really then, you're ready to start going. Because once you get into level 2, that's where a lot of the fun starts and a lot of the customization between projects and paths happens. And that was a ton of information. So now, I'm going to pause and let's ask for some questions. If you have a question, you can go ahead and type it in the chat bubble. Kitsi, I don't know if there are instructions for taking specific people off mute if they have questions.
We'll do it to the chat. That way I can catalog them a lot easier.
Perfect.
So just wanted to address, I addressed this in the chat already, but just wanted to confirm, if you do choose a path and you want to change it, you chose the wrong one, you have 30 days to do that, and you can do that through Toastmasters International. You can contact them via email or phone call. They're really great to talk to, and you can usually get a answer pretty quickly. I posted in the chat the link to the Contact Us page.
Oh, that's great, yeah. And I'll also say in general that Toastmasters International, the Contact Us line, they are incredibly helpful. They are incredibly nice. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and you can call them as many times as you want. They probably have blocked my number at this point with how many times I've called them for just random questions. But never be hesitant about reaching out to them because that's what they're there for. Or for that matter, your district leadership, like Kitsi, your program quality director.
Yeah. So a couple more that just came into the chat here before I lose them. Now you guys are typing fast, which is fine. But I'm just trying to. So do you have to save the evaluation form completed by the evaluator anywhere after completing each level? You can. There is an e-portfolio where you can save them, but that's not required because that's just for your own personal record. So check with your VP of Education as to what process they have set up to get that evidence before approving levels. Every VPE and club does it differently, so check with them as to what they need. As far as who can approve completion levels in Basecamp, that is primarily the VPE. However, the president and secretary also have access to do that. And then what Natasha was talking about was you approve it in Basecamp, that unlocks the next level, but then you submit it in Club Central, just like you have the Legacy Awards, so that they count towards your Distinguished Club program and the award for that member. Natasha, how long has it taken you to get to level 4 in your first path?
Hey, good question. I started level 1 in February of this year, and I have only one speech to give before I finish level 5. And I will tell you a secret that people seem to be really hesitant to do, but you can go out of order. If I go to the D4TM website and I look ahead at that paths and projects list, and I know, okay, right now I'm on level 1, we'll say, for example. I'm not too worried about developing my skills as a basic public speaker because I'm pretty experienced at this point, but I still have to work on my icebreaker and speech evaluator. But I know in level 3, one of my electives is going to give me the option to be a table topics master. I'm not going to wait 3 months to be a table topics master while I slog through all my speeches. I'm going to work with my VP of Education or just look at my club meeting sign-up list. And although my next speech isn't scheduled for a month from now, next week they need a table topics master. So I'm going to go ahead and just sign up and do it now. And I'm going to go to that tutorials and resources page that we looked at, and I'm going to go ahead and proactively find the resources for that project there. And I'm just going to jump ahead and do it so that once I get to level 3, I'll have already completed a part of it. So there's a little bit of strategy that you can do. You certainly don't have to, but if your goal is to be as efficient as possible, definitely go ahead and look ahead. And do go through the whole project. Don't just skip ahead to the role in the evaluation resource. Take advantage of all of the materials and resources it's going to give you, but don't feel like you have to be limited because then it can take quite a bit longer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, if you can still do projects outside the club, but you do need a Toastmaster to evaluate that speech to receive credit for it, just like we have in the previous legacy program. Paul asked about repeating the icebreaker after being evaluated. So sorry for the confusion there. So it's not the icebreaker itself, is that you do your icebreaker, then project number 2 in level 1 is to give a speech of your choice, any speech that you want, and then you get evaluated, and then you either repeat the same speech or a different speech and apply that feedback. Now, you will have to repeat the icebreaker every time you start a new path, but you can tweak that icebreaker to be different and relate it to that path, for example. Jenny, you're correct. You cannot access the PDF if you jump to another path, which is why, in general, Toastmasters does recommend that you do this in sequential orders because the projects do build onto each other. But like Natasha mentioned, if the requirement is something like serving in a role in your meeting, you can do that whenever it fits the schedule of your meeting, and you can download that evaluation resource for any project at all ahead of time. Yes, Jenny, that's a great suggestion. There's an outline worksheet within the icebreaker project that you can use every time you do the icebreaker, and you can tweak that to be different. What I've done is that when I started my path, Motivational Strategies, my icebreaker was about why I chose that path and how and what motivates me. What was your icebreaker about, Natasha?
My icebreaker was similar. I talked about visionary communication, about my goals for helping my team at work and creating resources for them specifically around presentation building best practices and resources I develop in classes I teach. And conveniently enough, I've been actually able to do just that as I've been working through my path. So I've also been able to continue using that as a topic for some of my later speeches where it was appropriate.
Awesome. Jenny asked, what incentives are there for those in pathways to play meeting roles? And she mentioned example, bingo games, prizes, etc. I think this is a great question, and it really does depend on the club and something that the VPE can work on with the other officers. I'll share what we've done in my club, and Natasha could share anything from her club. And the bingo game that Jenny mentioned is something a different club shared, and if you go to district411.org, Stephanie actually created a post sharing that bingo. I'll actually find the link in a minute and post it in the chat. What we've done in my club as well is we've created a recognition program where we have set some basic requirements that you need to qualify for this recognition program. And those basic requirements are basically our club standards. You know, how many times a month do we expect at a minimum that you attend a meeting, that you've paid your dues, that how many times a month we expect you to take on a role, how many times a month or a quarter do we expect you to give a speech. And then every quarter we are going to recognize the people who have met those requirements, and they're also eligible to be nominated for that quarterly award in excellence in communication or leadership. So that's one way that we're approaching it. There's that bingo game that some other clubs have done. We'd love to hear, Natasha, if there's anything that your club is doing, or if any other club that's here has implemented anything.
Yeah, I'll say our club is a little more traditional, though I love these ideas. I can't wait to read more about them. As VP of Education, I very seriously I take my role very seriously in that every single month I go through and I look at when everyone has last taken on a certain role, and for the next 2 months out, I'll give everyone a short period of time where they can voluntarily sign up for certain roles or speeches, and after that, based on when I know people will be available or not, I will simply start assigning roles. But that does bring up a good point, which is that once you go into Basecamp, you're going to notice that you have your own profile in Basecamp, and it's going to give you this ability to look at and document when you last had a particular role. So I can go in and say that on March 3rd of 2018 was the last time I was Table Topics Master, so that when I'm looking at when I should do, what kind of role I should do, assume at this point that I've done all of them, but I feel like it's been a while since I've done a role and I'm not quite sure what I should do. Well, that's the one that I did farthest back. So maybe that's a good time for me to go through and take on that role again.
Awesome. Anybody have any other suggestions of what they're doing in your club? Okay, Paul, are there any requirements for the second speech? Are you referring to when you click Options tab? Is that in Basecamp Manager or the website? If you can clarify that for me. But the requirements for the second speech, in Pathways, I'm guessing you're referring to the evaluation and feedback project. So there's 2 speeches in that project, plus you have to be an evaluator. The first speech in that project can be anything you want at all. So can the second one. The only requirement for the second one is that you apply the feedback that you received in the first one. The role of the Vice President of Education in general is to manage the educational program for the club. So that means signing people up for roles and actually making sure that they are meeting the goals that they set out for themselves. Within Basecamp Manager, specifically in Pathways, is to approve those level completions so that their members can unlock the next part. Jenny, I will double check on that as far as the reports in Pathways. Have you tried refreshing and that's still not working? That might just be a glitch in the system, and the best way to get a resolution for that would be to contact Toastmasters International directly, and they can help you troubleshoot that. Tim just shared that exporting those reports from Pathways to Excel is the best option, and that way you have it with you locally as well. Jenny, what is the equivalent of CC manuals in Pathways as a requirement for advanced clubs? So that depends on the club. Each advanced club determines their requirements for their club. But as Tim mentioned, yeah, level 3 is probably a good bet there, because level 1 is sort of the basics, and then level 2 has kind of the beginnings for your path, and then level 3 is where you start getting to those electives that give you those other skills that you would get in CC. Tim is in Evening Stars, which is an advanced course, and that is what they're using, level 3. Carla asked about timeline for the VPE webinar on Pathways. We'll probably do one next month. However, there is a recording of a previous one that Tim did on our website already that you can look at now, and we'll do an updated one soon. So that'll be D4TM, here, I'll post it here, .org/webinars has all of the recordings of our previous webinars, and this one will be there as well. And Tim also reminded me that, yes, level 3 is also the requirement for the international speech contest. So previously you had to have completed 6 speeches, and now it's level 3 in Pathways. So that's another one that you can use as an equivalent there. We would also love to hear, in addition to any other questions in the last 7 minutes we have left, if you have any ideas or feedback about this webinar. Basically, what other topics would you like to hear about as we build out the rest of the series? So if you can type those in the chat as well. And then I'm going to take control back, Natasha, so I can show my wrap-up slides. I can't figure this out. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thanks, Jenny. That's a fantastic idea, and we'll definitely be doing that very soon. Because we know that clubs are struggling with how to get others to adopt this? Carla, yes, the UI is a little challenging, and we have given that feedback to Toastmasters International. We don't have a timeline from them yet on when we can expect changes, but I know they're taking that feedback and looking to make changes to improve that. Since Pathways seems disruptive with members on different programs without understanding how to support each other. Yes, thank you, Jenny. I agree. And that's part of why we're doing this webinar, so everybody can at least have an understanding of what that level 1 looks like. So even if you're not on Pathways yourself yet, you can start, you know what your new members are going through for that first level. I do recommend one thing that would help with adoption as well is even if you are sticking with the legacy program for a while, go ahead and select your path, do that icebreaker so you can unlock that first level, and that'll give you an idea of what those new members are going through and be able to show them yourself what that looks like. Jenny asked, it took 12 years to launch Pathways. When will the next version update for Pathways occur? Yes, I don't have an answer for that one, Jenny. I'll send that to Toastmasters International, but we haven't heard a timeline on when we can expect those changes yet. All right, so before we leave, I just want to, let me share this real quick here. Just a couple of reminders before we wrap up here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Jenny, I'll check. Again, I think I would recommend checking straight with Toastmasters International because unfortunately, as a district leader, I can't see that either. Natasha, have you been able to access the progress reports in Basecamp Manager as a Basecamp Manager?
You know, I haven't had to do that yet.
Okay. It seems like, Tim, have you been able to? Because it's this, I know that you have access as well. So I wanted to just mention that we are launching a new Pathways incentive called Pathways Explorers to encourage clubs to get members to sign up for Basecamp as well as getting some traction on completing levels. So this is what it's going to be, 75% of your base in progress by March 1st, and we have instructions on our website on how to do that. And then if you achieve that and also get 4 level 1 submitted, you'll get an extra $25. So this is the incentive that is replacing last year's incentive. I also want to remind you guys that we have some incentives that are due today and this weekend. In fact, tomorrow is the last day to submit your club success plans to earn your $50 in district credit. You need to submit that with signatures of 4 officers and your team photo. Also on Monday is the last day for September Sanity in order to get $50 in district credit for renewing 75% of your base. Then we have Smetley Stretch due at the end of the month. The open house challenge, this is a 2-part challenge just so that you guys are aware. Hold an open house before the end of this month and then add 3 new members 4 weeks after that open house. And then finally, Early Achievers is if you achieve 5 Distinguished Club Program goals by October 31st. So it sounds like Tim has been able to access the report, and maybe it's a refresh issue or specifically to you and your computer, Jenny. So again, I would suggest contacting Toastmasters International, just calling them. And actually, we sent an email to Toastmasters with some of the feedback that we got from you guys at the TLI town hall, and that's one of the things that they replied with, that if there's any, if you guys are having any trouble navigating the system, that you can call them and they can walk you through it. And then finally, some upcoming events. Any of you who are president or vice presidents of education, we have our business meeting tomorrow, September 17th at 7 p.m. You must visit d4tm.org/business to register by 3 p.m. in order to get your credentials. We also have a bunch of club growth webinars coming up. And again, d4tm.org/webinars gets you access to all of the upcoming and past webinars. And then we are hoping to have our next TLI in December. We're still looking for a venue and a chair if anybody's interested with that. No, Jenny, we cannot use district credits for pathways. They do not actually let us purchase paths that way because that's considered membership, and we're not allowed to use district credits towards that. All right, 1 more minute left. Any last-minute questions, guys? Thank you so much for attending. All right, well, I want to give Natasha a huge thanks for putting this webinar together and sharing all of your expertise. And thank you to all of you for coming on a Saturday. We had 40+ people here at one point, and that's amazing. I really value your commitment to Pathways and getting started on the right track for yourself and your club. Natasha, any parting words?
No, just thank you for having me, and please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to Kitsy, who can direct any other questions you might have to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the recording now, but I'll hang out here for a few more minutes if anybody has any other questions.